You've been praying. You've been pacing. You've been wrestling with thoughts that won't leave your mind. You've been trying to figure it all out. How it's going to work. How the bills will be paid. How the door will open. How the healing will happen. You've been overthinking, replaying scenarios that haven't even happened, projecting fears into a future God has already secured. And I came to tell you, God is already handling it. Yes, what you are anxious about, what keeps you up at night, what you're losing peace over, it is already being handled by the one who never slumbers and never sleeps. There is a reason the scripture tells us to be anxious for nothing, because anxiety is an insult to the sovereignty of God. When you overthink, you place your trust in your thoughts instead of placing your confidence in His word. You exalt your logic above His promise. You allow your limited understanding to compete with His infinite wisdom. You sit in a seat of analysis when you should be kneeling in a posture of surrender. What if I told you that your breakthrough isn't waiting on more thinking? It's waiting on more trusting. Faith is not the absence of thought, but the surrender of thought. It's when your mind stops obsessing and your spirit starts agreeing. The reason many people feel overwhelmed is because they're trying to do God's job. You weren't built to carry the weight of the outcome. You were built to obey. You were built to believe. You were built to walk by faith, not by sight. The stress you feel is the byproduct of assuming a position that doesn't belong to you. That position belongs to God. He is the author and the finisher. You are not responsible for finishing what He authored. You are responsible for trusting Him from page to page. Some of you are sitting in the middle of a process, staring at circumstances, and assuming God has forgotten you. But just because you don't see movement doesn't mean God isn't working. God moves best in silence. Seeds grow underground. Miracles mature in mystery. You keep checking the surface while God is cultivating what eyes haven't seen beneath it. You want the fruit before He finishes the root. You want the outcome before you finish the obedience. And in your waiting, the enemy starts whispering. What if it doesn't work? What if the door doesn't open? What if the report doesn't change? And you start overthinking yourself out of a move of God. Overthinking is the thief of your present peace. It hijacks the now. It takes you from this moment and projects you into a future where God is not in control. But the truth is, there's not a single second where He loses control. He knows the end from the beginning. He's not surprised by what you're facing. He's not anxious about the outcome. He already saw it, planned for it, and made a way through it. And while you're worried about what's next, He's already completed it. The answer is not in more thinking. The answer is in more trusting. God's faithfulness does not require your approval. It requires your alignment. And to align means you stop wrestling and start resting. Some of you don't need another word. You don't need another confirmation. You don't need another sign. You need to rest. You need to sleep. You need to let it go. You need to release the reins and stop trying to control what was never yours to manage. You've been praying, but you haven't been trusting. You've been asking, but you haven't been resting. You've been declaring, but you haven't been releasing. Faith is not just declaring the promise. It is living as though it's already done. And the truth is, it is already done. What you're worried about, God has already spoken to. What you're anxious about, He has already provided for. Before the problem came, the provision was set in place. Before the enemy formed the weapon, God secured your victory. So you can choose today to keep overthinking or to start surrendering, to keep running in circles or to stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, to keep playing God in your mind or to rest in the truth that He is God and you are not. When your thoughts get loud, let your faith get louder. When your mind runs wild, remind yourself that your God reigns. And when you're tempted to overthink again, pause and say this: God is already handling it, because He is. He always has been. And He always will be. Overthinking is a subtle form of unbelief. It often disguises itself as wisdom, caution, or responsibility, but underneath, it reveals a lack of trust in the sovereignty and sufficiency of God. It is the human mind trying to play the role of the divine. When we overthink, we are not merely reflecting, we are rehearsing fear, magnifying uncertainty, and placing our confidence in our own limited ability to figure things out. The problem is not that we think, but that we think beyond what God has already spoken. When we analyze possibilities to the point that we no longer believe in the promises, we have shifted from faith into fear. It is an attempt to maintain control in a world that is being governed by the one who holds the universe in His hands. Overthinking becomes a cycle. A person will pray and ask God to intervene, and within minutes of saying amen, they begin crafting backup plans, considering worst-case scenarios, and imagining what will happen if things don't go the way they hope. They will declare that they believe God is in control, yet their mind cannot sit still. This kind of internal wrestling is not a mark of faith. It's a manifestation of distrust. You cannot fully surrender to the will of God and simultaneously obsess over how He will perform it. To believe in God means you must also believe that He is both willing and able to fulfill what He promised. The danger of overthinking is not only that it weakens faith, but it strengthens fear. It gives power to what you do not want and silences the power of what God has already decreed. Faith does not operate in the realm of evidence. It works in the realm of trust. You do not need all the answers when you have the assurance of God's presence. But when we overthink, we begin to behave as though everything depends on us. We remove God from His throne in our minds and place ourselves there, attempting to rule over outcomes that were never our responsibility to begin with. Overthinking says, God, I know you're powerful, but let me help you figure this out. It's an insult to the authority of the Almighty. It's like trying to edit the blueprint of a house after the foundation has already been poured. The plan is already in motion. The outcome has already been determined. Our job is not to redesign what God has already authored. Our job is to trust Him page by page, moment by moment. The mind that overthinks is the mind that doubts, not always loudly, but in subtle, consistent whispers. What if this doesn't work? What if they don't call back? What if the money doesn't come? What if I made a mistake? These are not just harmless thoughts. They are seeds. And when these seeds are planted and watered with attention, they grow into trees of anxiety, depression, and even spiritual paralysis. They keep you from moving forward. They keep you locked in fear. They make you question what you already know in your spirit. Overthinking does not bring clarity. It brings confusion. And confusion is never from God. God does not speak in riddles when it comes to His will for your life. He leads you with peace, not panic. He directs your steps, not with chaos, but with quiet confidence. Some people overthink because they have made past decisions that didn't turn out well. They are haunted by regret and terrified of repeating past pain. So they try to compensate for yesterday's wounds by over-controlling today's choices. But you cannot live in the present by being a prisoner of the past. You cannot hear God clearly when you are still punishing yourself for things that are already under the blood. Overthinking is the mind's way of saying, I can't trust what I hear from God because I once misheard Him. But the grace of God covers even our missteps. And if He allowed it, He will use it. He wastes nothing, not even our failures. So there is no need to keep replaying what went wrong. That cycle of overthinking is keeping you from receiving what's going right. God has already made a way, but your mind is still stuck at the closed door. There are people who overthink because they believe being in control means being safe. But control is an illusion. It is not control that keeps us safe. It is God. It is not plans that protect us. It is purpose. And if you are walking in the purpose of God, you will be protected even when the path seems unpredictable. God never promised you comfort, but He promised His presence. And His presence is the antidote to overthinking. When you truly believe He is with you, you stop trying to figure out every detail. You stop playing the what-if game. You stop running mental simulations of disaster. You stop draining your energy by imagining things that may never happen. And you start resting in the fact that if God brought you to it, He is faithful to bring you through it. Overthinking also reveals a misunderstanding of how God works. We think that if we think long enough, hard enough, and deep enough, we will arrive at clarity. But clarity is not always given before obedience. Many times God speaks and then waits. He tells you to move, and then He watches if you trust Him. And if you insist on overthinking everything, you'll talk yourself out of moving at all. You'll paralyze your progress with questions that God already answered in your spirit. And then you'll wonder why you feel spiritually stuck. It's not because God isn't speaking. It's because your mind won't stop talking. You've let your thoughts become louder than His voice. You've let your intellect become more influential than His Spirit. We often quote the scripture, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. But many people quote it and still they lean on logic. They lean on people. They lean on plans. And then when the plan fails, they panic. But when you truly trust God, your understanding becomes secondary. You no longer need everything to make sense. You no longer need all the steps in advance. You just need the next step. And when you take the next step in faith, you give up the need to control. You give up the need to overthink. You let go of the illusion that your mind can protect you better than God can. Overthinking is really just fear dressed in reason. It is fear wearing the disguise of responsibility. And it keeps many people in cycles of hesitation, always preparing but never progressing, always analyzing but never advancing. Faith is not an exercise in logic, it is a discipline of surrender. It is the act of releasing the reins of control and placing full confidence in a God who sees what we cannot see, knows what we cannot know, and does what we cannot do. Faith is not the accumulation of answers. It is the relinquishment of the need to have them. It is trusting when it makes no sense, believing when there is no proof, and resting when the pressure is pushing you to panic. The more we seek to control every outcome, the further we drift from the essence of true faith. Because faith does not demand understanding, it demands trust. And trust cannot live in the same space as the need for control. Many people confuse faith with mental effort. They believe if they think hard enough, repeat affirmations long enough, and quote scriptures frequently enough, they are walking in faith. But all of that becomes religious ritual if the heart is still resisting surrender. The work of faith is not in speaking louder or praying longer. It is in letting go sooner. It is in learning to rest in the presence of God, even while your circumstances remain unresolved. You can declare all day that God is able, but if your heart is still busy trying to manage the outcome, then you have not truly surrendered. Faith does not come through mental wrestling. It is born in the quietness of release. It is not born in a mind that demands guarantees, but in a spirit that whispers, "Even if I don't understand, I still trust you." The reason so many people struggle to see the manifestation of God's promises is because they are trying to manifest it themselves. They have taken on the burden of production as though it is their job to bring it to pass. But the moment you step into the role of how, you step out of the realm of trust. It is not your responsibility to figure out how God will do it. It is your responsibility to obey what He told you. And sometimes what He tells you will not align with your reasoning. He may instruct you to give when you feel like you need to receive. He may tell you to move when everything in your life looks stuck. He may lead you into uncomfortable places to test whether you walk by sight or by faith. The question is not whether you believe in God's power. The question is whether you believe in His process. Surrender is not passive. It is not the absence of action, but the presence of alignment. When you surrender, you are not doing nothing. You are doing the hardest thing, letting God be God. You are stepping aside so that His strength can be made perfect in your weakness. You are resisting the urge to interfere, manipulate, or fix things in your own strength. And that kind of surrender is only possible when you trust the character of God more than the clarity of the path. If you have to see the entire road before you take the first step, you are not walking by faith. You are walking by control. God does not give you the whole plan up front because He is not interested in creating robots. He is developing trust. He is shaping you into someone who walks not by instructions, but by intimacy with Him. There are moments in life when God will allow things to fall apart, not to punish you, but to purge you of the illusion that you are in control. He will allow systems to break, relationships to shift, doors to close, all to remind you that your hope is not in anything man-made. It is in Him. And the only way to truly walk in that kind of faith is to lay down your obsession with knowing and pick up a lifestyle of trusting. You don't need to know how He will do it. You just need to believe that He will. The more you try to mentally predict every move, the more room you give fear to grow. But when you surrender, you evict fear and invite peace. Because peace is not the result of perfect circumstances. It is the result of perfect trust. Faith doesn't mean you won't feel uncertainty. It means you will move in spite of it. And the movement is not always external. Sometimes it is the internal decision to rest, to worship, to wait. That kind of rest is radical. It is not laziness, it is strategic stillness. It is the posture that says, I don't have to chase what God has already prepared for me. Many times people panic because things are not moving fast enough. But faith says, if God is not moving, then I don't need to either. You don't have to overthink your next decision when your life is submitted to the one who orchestrates all things for your good. When you truly believe that God is for you, you stop trying to outthink life and start flowing with grace. Control often feels like safety, but in the kingdom of God, safety is in surrender. That is why Scripture says His strength is made perfect in weakness. Because God is not glorified through your control. He is glorified through your dependence. The more you try to handle everything, the more burdened you become. But when you release control, you create space for God's peace to enter. That is the difference between religion and relationship. Religion tries to earn, prove, and strive. Relationship trusts, surrenders, and rests. God is not moved by how hard you try. He is moved by how deeply you trust. One of the most powerful things you can do is to quiet your mind and simply say, God, I trust you. That simple declaration dismantles fear. It disarms anxiety. It dethrones control. And it lifts you out of overthinking into a place of spiritual authority. Because authority does not come through striving. It comes through surrender. The enemy wants you to think that your mental effort is what holds things together. But it's not your thinking that holds your life. It's God's grace. It's not your strategy that opens doors. It's God's favor. So when you feel yourself slipping into the need to figure it all out, take a step back and ask yourself, is this control or is this trust? Letting go is not weakness. It is worship. It is you lifting your hands and saying, God, I refuse to carry what you already took to the cross. I refuse to solve what you've already settled in eternity. I refuse to fear what you have already conquered. That is the power of surrender. It breaks the cycle of striving and invites the flow of divine provision. It allows you to live light in a world that wants to make you heavy. It allows you to smile when there is no visible reason to. It allows you to move forward when others stay stuck. Because surrender is not giving up, it is giving over. It is not the end of effort. It is the beginning of effectiveness. It is not a sign that you are lost. It is a signal that you are finally being led. God does not need noise to move. He does not need chaos to create. He is not found in the storm, the earthquake, or the fire, but in the still small voice that whispers to the surrendered soul. And yet many people miss his movement because they are looking for dramatic signs while ignoring divine silence. We have been conditioned to believe that if we can't see it, hear it, or feel it, then nothing is happening. But in the kingdom of God, the most powerful transformations often take place in silence, in hidden places, in secret chambers where human eyes cannot reach. Just as a seed grows underground long before it ever breaks the surface, so too does God develop his greatest works out of sight. The silence is not the absence of activity. It is the environment of divine construction. In moments where you feel that God is quiet, you must remind yourself that silence is not abandonment. It is preparation. When you don't hear anything, it does not mean God has stopped working. It means he is doing something deeper than your senses can perceive. We are often so addicted to results and immediate confirmation that we equate silence with delay and stillness with disapproval. But God is never in a rush. He is not working on your schedule. He is working on your heart. He is shaping you, molding you, preparing you to carry the very thing you're praying for. And he knows that if he gave it to you too early, you would not be able to handle it. So while you are panicking about timing, God is perfecting your capacity. We live in a world of constant noise. We want updates, progress reports, instant feedback, and real-time results. And when God doesn't give them to us, we become anxious, thinking he's forgotten us, or that nothing is happening. But faith is not just about believing in the noise, it's about trusting in the quiet. When God is silent, it does not mean he is still. It means he is sovereign. He doesn't need to announce every move to validate that he's working. In fact, his best work is often done in ways we don't recognize until after the breakthrough comes. By the time you see the fruit, the root has already grown. By the time the door opens, the favor has already been established. What looks like nothing to you may already be everything to God. The problem is not that God isn't working. The problem is that we are too focused on external indicators to detect internal activity. But God doesn't always start with what you can see. He begins with what you believe. And belief must be cultivated in the dark. Belief must be watered in seasons of silence. Because when there is no visible evidence, the only thing you have is your trust. That's where the real battle lies. Not in what's happening around you, but in what's happening within you. Will you keep trusting even when you see nothing? Will you keep obeying even when you hear nothing? Will you keep believing even when you feel nothing? That's the test of maturity. That's the measure of spiritual growth. It's easy to praise when you see results, but can you still worship when heaven seems quiet? God moves best in mystery because mystery protects what's sacred. If God revealed everything too soon, the enemy would use that information against you. So sometimes God covers you with silence not to confuse you, but to protect you. He hides his process so that nothing and no one can interfere with it. You may not understand it now, but in time, You will see that his silence was a shield. It kept your destiny safe while it was still in development. Because not everyone can handle what God is doing in your life. Not everyone can be trusted with the details of your calling. And so God, in his wisdom, cloaks his movement in silence and calls you to trust what you cannot trace. Waiting in silence is not easy. It is one of the hardest assignments of faith. But it is in that quiet place that you are being refined. In that space of not knowing, your character is being tested. Will you remain faithful? Will you continue to obey? Will you trust the process even when the process feels like pain? These are the questions silence asks. And your response to that silence determines what you're ready to carry in the next season. Most people want the blessing without the breaking. They want the manifestation without the maturing. But God is not just interested in giving you what you want. He is committed to making you into who he designed you to be. That takes time. That takes silence. That takes trust. There is something powerful about learning to rest while nothing seems to be moving. Rest is not weakness. It is the sign that you believe God is moving, even when you are not. It is the declaration that you no longer need constant updates to believe that the outcome is already secured. When a farmer plants a seed, he doesn't go back the next day and dig it up to see if it's growing. He waters it, covers it, and waits in expectation. He knows that just because he can't see the growth doesn't mean it's not happening. So why do we treat God's promises like they need to prove themselves to us every day? Why do we question the process just because the progress isn't visible? Could it be that God has already done more than you know, and the only thing left is for you to stop striving and start believing? You must learn to be okay with the fact that God's methods will often remain a mystery until the miracle is manifested. And even then, you may not fully understand how it all came together. But understanding is not a prerequisite for trust. You don't need to understand how the heart beats to know that it keeps you alive. You don't need to understand how oxygen works to keep breathing. And you don't need to understand all the mechanics of God's plan to keep trusting. Sometimes the greatest faith is demonstrated by the least movement. When you choose to be still and know that he is God, you are making a louder statement than any amount of striving ever could. Stillness is not inactivity, it is confidence. It is the heart saying, God, I believe you are working behind the scenes. I believe you are aligning every detail. I believe you are moving mountains I can't even see yet. And that belief becomes the foundation for supernatural peace. Not peace based on progress, but peace based on presence. The presence of God is not always thunderous. Sometimes it is soft. Sometimes it is hidden. Sometimes it wraps around you like a gentle breeze. And if you're not paying attention, you might miss it while looking for lightning. But he is there, he is always there, working, building, orchestrating, preparing, aligning. And just because he hasn't said anything yet, doesn't mean the story isn't still unfolding. You were never called to produce the outcome, only to obey the instruction. That's the divine order of purpose. God gives the command, and you respond, not with control, but with surrender. When you begin to take ownership of results that only God can create, you step out of obedience and into anxiety. You begin to carry a weight you were never designed to hold. You begin to think that if you don't make it happen, it won't happen. That mindset is not rooted in faith. It's rooted in fear. The truth is, God has never needed your ability to perform. He only requires your willingness to obey. If you obey his voice, he is obligated to fulfill his word. But when you try to fulfill his word without obeying his voice, you end up exhausted, frustrated, and confused. Because the blessing is not in your effort, it is in your alignment. There is a divine distinction between action and obedience. Not every action is obedience, and not every movement is led by the Spirit. Many times people are busy but not obedient. They are active but not aligned. They are doing what seems wise in their own eyes, but they have never stopped to ask if it is what God requires. And then when things fall apart, they blame the process when in reality they never followed the instructions. Obedience is the foundation of divine partnership. God doesn't need you to predict the outcome. He needs you to trust the next step. And that's where most people get stuck. They want to see the full picture before they take the first move. But God's instructions rarely come with full explanations. He speaks in steps, not summaries. And until you learn to walk in obedience without clarity, you will delay the very destiny you keep praying for. God honors obedience, not control. He responds to submission, not strategy. There is a divine sequence. God speaks, you obey, he fulfills. That's how heaven moves. When God told Noah to build the ark, he didn't explain the flood in scientific terms. He didn't describe the mechanics of how the animals would arrive or how the water would rise. He simply gave a command. And Noah obeyed. That obedience preserved not only his life, but the lives of generations. Now imagine if Noah had sat down and tried to understand every detail before he started building. Imagine if he had overthought the logistics and hesitated in uncertainty. He would have missed his moment. And that's what overthinking does. It causes delay. And delay is often disobedience in disguise. You cannot be partially obedient and expect complete results. Obedience is not negotiation. It is not offering God your preferred option. It is responding fully to what He said, even when it stretches your logic, defies your comfort, or contradicts your plan. God's instructions are often inconvenient. They will challenge your ego, disrupt your comfort, and confront your assumptions. But that discomfort is where the power lies, because obedience breaks the limits off your life. It introduces you to a level of provision, favor, and clarity that cannot be accessed through overthinking or self-reliance. When you let go of needing to control how it unfolds, you make room for the supernatural to unfold in ways your mind could never have imagined. The reason many people are tired is not because they are doing too much, but because they're doing what they were never assigned. They are carrying roles that belong to God, stressing over outcomes that are not in their jurisdiction. You are not responsible for the rain. You are responsible for planting the seed. You are not responsible for the open door. You are responsible for walking in obedience when He says move. When you confuse obedience with outcome, you exhaust yourself trying to play God in your own life. But when you step back and say, Lord, I will do what you ask, and I trust you to do what I can't, you unlock a flow of peace and provision that only obedience can activate. Think of Abraham. When God told him to leave his country and go to a land He would show him, Abraham didn't get a map. He didn't get a timeline. He didn't get a guarantee. He got a word. And that word was enough. He obeyed, and through his obedience, the covenant of blessing was established. Imagine the weight of destiny that was resting on his simple decision to move when God said move. That's the power of obedience. It links your small actions to eternal outcomes. You never know what door you're unlocking when you simply say yes to God. You never know whose breakthrough is tied to your obedience. That's why it matters. That's why you must resist the temptation to overanalyze what God has called you to act on. Obedience does not require you to feel ready. It requires you to trust that God knows what He's doing, even when you don't. Often we wait for perfect circumstances before we act, but faith-filled obedience moves even in uncertainty. If you only obey when it's convenient, you are not truly obedient. You are simply agreeable. True obedience shows up in the wilderness, in the waiting, in the uncertainty. It is when you trust God enough to say yes without knowing what happens next. And that kind of trust honors God. It draws His presence. It attracts His provision. Because He is not impressed by our plans. He is moved by our surrender. The outcomes of your life are not your responsibility. They belong to the God who authored your beginning and your end. Your job is to listen, to respond, and to walk in step with His voice. When you do that, you no longer live with the pressure to make everything work. You live with the confidence that the one who called you is faithful to fulfill what He has started. You don't have to manipulate doors open or force people to understand your purpose. You don't have to stress over timelines or outcomes. You just obey. And in that obedience, there is divine rhythm. There is grace for every step. There is favor for every assignment. There is provision waiting for every place He sends you. The burden of obedience is light because it is shared with God. He never commands without also equipping. He never instructs without also preparing the path. So the pressure you feel is not from Him. It's from the need to control what only He can manage. When you release the outcome, you free yourself from the bondage of anxiety. You begin to live in the flow of grace. You begin to hear more clearly, respond more swiftly, and rest more deeply, because obedience aligns you with heaven's rhythm. It tunes your heart to God's frequency, and it reminds you that the result is never your job. It is always His. Peace is not found in knowing every answer, mapping out every move, or securing every outcome. It is found in trusting the one who already has. The world teaches you that peace is the product of control, that if you can manage your schedule, balance your finances, and avoid unexpected problems, then you will feel calm. But the kingdom of God operates differently. In God's kingdom, peace is not the result of perfect circumstances, but the result of a perfect trust. It is not about what's happening around you, but about what's happening within you. And the moment you begin to lean on your own understanding instead of God's wisdom, Peace becomes elusive. Overthinking replaces peace with pressure. Planning replaces trust with tension. And before you know it, you're not living by faith. You're living by fear dressed as strategy. Many people believe they will have peace once things fall into place. Once the loan is approved, once the test results come back clear, once the meeting goes well, once they get the confirmation they've been waiting for, then they will feel settled. But that's not peace. That's emotional relief, and emotional relief is temporary. It's fragile. It shifts every time your circumstances shift. But the peace of God is different. It's deeper. It's durable. It is not dependent on external success or visible signs. It is rooted in the unchanging nature of God. When your trust is in Him, peace is not something you wait for. It's something you walk in. You carry it through the valley. You carry it in the storm. You carry it in the silence. Because peace is not the absence of problems, it is the presence of God. There are people who pray for peace, but they won't let go of control. They ask God to calm their mind while still holding on to the wheel. But you can't experience peace until you release the need to predict and direct everything. Peace requires surrender. It is the fruit of trust. It grows when you say, God, I don't understand it all, but I trust you in it all. It takes root when you stop trying to protect yourself with overanalysis and start protecting your heart with truth. The truth that He is with you. The truth that He is for you. The truth that nothing surprises Him and nothing is too hard for Him. That truth becomes an anchor in uncertainty. And where there is truth, there is peace. The mind loves patterns. It seeks understanding. It wants closure. So when life feels open-ended, the mind rushes to fill in the blanks. It imagines the worst-case scenarios, rehearses old wounds, calculates endless possibilities, all in an attempt to feel safe. But safety does not come from mental control. It comes from spiritual alignment. It comes from knowing who holds your future, not just knowing what the future holds. That's why people who seem to have everything together on the outside still live in fear. They've built their peace on sand. Their peace is conditional. But real peace, lasting peace, comes from trusting God so deeply that even when the storm comes, you are unmoved. Even when the plan changes, your heart is steady. Not because of what you see, but because of who you believe. The enemy loves to use uncertainty as a weapon. He whispers, what if this fails? What if they walk away? What if you don't make it? And as soon as you entertain those thoughts, your peace begins to erode. But peace is protected when you take those thoughts captive and bring them under the authority of Christ. Peace is maintained when you choose to believe that even if it doesn't happen the way you imagined, God is still good. Even if the timeline shifts, His plan is still perfect. Even if you don't feel strong, His strength is still sufficient. It's not denial, it's decision. You make a decision not to let your mind lead you into panic. You make a decision to rest, not because you see a way out, but because you know the waymaker. There is a stillness that comes when you finally release the need to be the one holding it all together. You realize that your responsibility is obedience, not outcome. You understand that God doesn't call you to stress over what's next. He calls you to walk with Him in the now. And in that awareness, you breathe differently. You think differently. You begin to feel the weight lift off your shoulders because you recognize it was never your weight to carry. That release is where peace flows. It's not found in figuring it all out. It's found in giving it all up. You stop treating peace like a reward and start treating it like a right, because it is. It's your portion. It was paid for. It was promised. And when you truly trust, it shows up. Your level of peace will always reveal your level of trust. If you are constantly anxious, constantly overthinking, constantly restless, it's not just a sign that your life is busy. It's a sign that your trust is low. You may be trusting God with your words, but not with your emotions. You may be saying, God is in control while your mind is running wild with doubt. But true trust brings rest. It brings stillness. It doesn't mean you have no questions, but it means your questions don't rob you of confidence. It doesn't mean you never get scared, but it means fear doesn't rule your decisions. You can be in a storm and still have peace. You can be in transition and still feel grounded. Because trust doesn't eliminate chaos, it transcends it. This kind of peace is not passive. It's powerful. It is aggressive in its ability to override confusion. It silences the lies of the enemy. It guards your heart and your mind. It is a weapon, not just a feeling. It is a shield, not just an escape. When you are walking in peace, you are walking in authority. You are saying to every force of darkness, I may not know the outcome, but I know my God, and that's enough. You are declaring that circumstances will not control your soul. And that declaration is what sets you apart. That is what keeps you anchored. That is what makes you unshakable in a world that is constantly shaking. Peace doesn't come when the storm ends. Peace comes when you realize the storm doesn't define your security. Peace doesn't come when the answers arrive. It comes when you accept that God already has the answers, and that's enough. You don't need every detail to breathe. You don't need every assurance to rest. You just need to trust. And trust is what opens the door to peace. Not trust in a plan, not trust in people, not trust in your own strength, but trust in the God who never fails. That trust builds an inner calm that doesn't rise and fall with circumstances. It becomes your foundation. It becomes your anchor. It becomes your testimony. Because peace is not something you visit. It's where you live when you truly trust. Before you ever entered the situation that now consumes your thoughts, God had already made provision. Before you even knew what to pray for, He had already dispatched the answer. What keeps you up at night, wondering, worrying, overthinking, stressing, God saw it coming long before you ever did. And not only did He see it, but He also secured your way through it. There is no moment of panic in your life that God hasn't already prepared a path for. He is not reacting to your crisis. He is not surprised by your circumstances. He is not improvising solutions. He is sovereign. He is deliberate. He is ahead of you. And when you truly grasp that truth, not as a theory but as a reality, it changes the posture of your heart. Most of the anxiety people carry is tied to uncertainty about the future. They worry about what's next, how something will work out, when things will shift. But what they fail to realize is that the future they are afraid of is already settled by the one who exists outside of time. God doesn't predict the future. He holds it. He doesn't forecast what might happen. He declares what already is. Your timeline is not unfolding randomly. It is orchestrated with intention. And when God speaks a word over your life, that word is already complete in eternity, even if it is still unfolding in time. He finishes before He starts. That means while you're walking through a process, the outcome is already secure. This is where trust becomes powerful. Not just trust in God's ability, but trust in His foresight. Trust in the fact that He saw the end before the beginning and called you according to what He already completed. The Bible doesn't say He's figuring it out with you. It says He's working all things together for your good. That implies something critical. Everything that feels disjointed in your life is already in divine alignment in His plan. While you're seeing pieces, He sees the whole. While you're staring at a closed door, He's guiding you toward the open, one you don't even know exists yet. And even the delay you're frustrated about is part of His preparation. Even the silence that feels painful is part of His process. You may feel stuck, but you are not forgotten. The very thing you've been overthinking, God is already in the middle of it. He's arranging people, shifting circumstances, aligning resources, and preparing solutions that haven't reached your eyes yet, but are already flowing through His hands. That's the nature of His sovereignty. It's not limited by your awareness. You don't have to understand it to benefit from it. You don't have to see the movement to be confident it's happening. This is what separates trust from logic. Logic needs proof, but trust lives in revelation. It knows that if God promised it, then it is already done, whether you see it now or not. You can stop overthinking when you truly believe that nothing is too hard for God. You can rest when you realize the result was never your responsibility. He already handled it. The healing you've been agonizing over, the provision you've been chasing, the relationship you've been trying to fix, He already spoke to it. And His word doesn't return void. It doesn't return halfway finished. It doesn't return confused or delayed. It returns accomplished. And if it hasn't manifested yet, then He's still working on the part you can't see. You don't need to manipulate, stress, or scheme. All you need to do is remain faithful, stay in alignment, and keep trusting. Some people live like they have to remind God about what they're facing, as if He's forgotten. But He hasn't. He is intricately involved in every detail. He sees your tears. He hears your prayers. He knows your doubts. And still He says, I've got it. That assurance is meant to silence your inner panic. That divine certainty is what carries you through seasons where you feel like nothing is happening. God doesn't always give you signs. Sometimes He gives you silence so you learn to walk by trust instead of sight. But that silence isn't empty. It's full of purpose, full of motion, full of answers that are forming behind the curtain of time. When you truly believe that God is ahead of you, you stop rushing. You stop trying to force what isn't ready. You stop questioning every delay. Because now you know, it's not a delay, it's divine timing. He's not slow, he's strategic. He's not waiting for things to line up, he's lining them up. And when it's time, nothing can stop what he has ordained. That includes your doubts. That includes your mistakes. That includes the fear that tries to paralyze you. None of that has the power to override what God already put into motion. And that's the beauty of grace. It's stronger than your flaws. It keeps working even when you stop believing. It holds you when you start questioning. It doesn't depend on your strength. It flows from His faithfulness. You've been trying to control something that was never yours to manage. That's why you're tired. That's why you're stressed. You were never designed to carry what only God can hold. So release it. Give it back to Him. That worry, that timeline, that expectation, that fear. Surrender it and say, God, I believe you're already in it. You already saw it. You already prepared the outcome. And when you say that from your heart, not just your lips, peace begins to flood your soul. Not because the situation changed instantly, but because your focus did. You stopped trying to hold everything together and started trusting the one who already has it all held in His hands. He's not just ahead of you in theory. He's literally already in your next step. The door you're wondering about, He's already there. The solution you're desperate for, He's already released it. The opportunity you've been waiting on, He's already prepared it with your name on it. You're not catching up to God's plan. You're walking into what's already been finished. And the only thing you need to do is keep moving in faith. Keep praying, not to convince Him to act, but to keep your spirit aligned with what He's doing. Keep believing not to earn the outcome, but to stay connected to the promise. Keep resting, not because everything is figured out, but because you trust the one who already has. There is nothing in your future that God hasn't already accounted for. There is no battle that He hasn't already won. No need that He hasn't already supplied. So you can stop overthinking, you can silence the questions, you can resist the fear. Because the God who brought you this far is the same God who is already where you're going. And He's not just ahead of you. He's preparing everything you need for when you arrive. So now that you've heard the truth, what will you do with it? Will you keep rehearsing your fears, or will you start declaring your faith? Will you keep calculating your way through life? Or will you finally cast your cares on the one who already handled it before time began? You see, your worry doesn't move God. Your faith does. Your panic doesn't impress heaven. Your trust does. The greatest insult to the sovereignty of God is not rebellion. It is your insistence on control. Because every time you overthink, you dethrone God in your own mind and enthrone your own logic. But the kingdom doesn't operate by logic. It operates by revelation, by trust, by obedience. And if you would dare to rest in what He has already settled, you would see peace like a river, clarity like a dawn, and favor like rain. You were not created to figure everything out. You were created to walk by faith and not by sight. You were not designed to carry the weight of the unknown. You were built to surrender. You were not made to chase outcomes. You were chosen to follow a king. And that king is not guessing. He's not waiting to see what happens. He is Alpha and Omega, beginning and end. That means He's already declared the end of your story, and its goal, it's victorious. So stop striving. Stop controlling. Stop overthinking. The battle is not yours. The outcome is not your responsibility. The future is not up for debate. Your God is not nervous. He is seated. He is settled. He is sovereign. And best of all, He is already there.